Hello everyone and welcome to another Creative Design Team monthly YouTube collaboration hop, where all week long we are going to be working on projects that revolve around the theme of back to school. Now, I don't actually have any back to school photos to share with you or projects to share with you today, so I've decided to take a bit of a twist on this and I've printed off some photos that sort of revolve around my classroom. I'm always learning new techniques, exploring new mediums and learning so much more in the crafty world, the paper crafting world. So I've printed off a little grid of photos here, mainly to do with colouring and also distress oxides. And this photo here is from last year where the launch of the new annual catalogue came out. And I was actually away on retreat. So I did manage to watch a little bit of the launch event, which is like a big classroom. There's so many things to learn when we have a launch event, and especially with a convention. And we've just gone through that again now, as a new catalogue is going to launch very, very soon, both a seasonal catalogue and also an annual catalogue. And these books here are like my textbooks. That's something that I refer to all the time. And so I thought for this YouTube collab, it would be my classroom. So I've got my photo printed here and you can see I've got some images here. I'm going to use the new Cozy Up scrapbooking set. Now, I do believe at the time of me recording this, the set with the thin cuts actually is not available anymore, but you can still purchase the standalone stamp set. So I'm going to show you a way of using that without having to do the die cutting. But these images aren't that hard to fussy cut out. They're a fairly simple design. There's nothing too intricate in them. So if you like this set, don't be put off by the fact that the thin cuts are gone. The stamp sets are still available. And you might notice that I've done a little bit of stamp surgery here. I have actually cut out the leaves because I didn't want the leaves in my little cup here. I just wanted the steam. So I do have to do a little bit of additional cutting on this thin cut because where I'm cutting out here is where a leaf would have been on this outside edge here. So I've just trimmed that bit off and nobody will know that there were leaves in the original design at all. I'm going to be working on an 8.5 by 11 page today. I'm just going to move these things off to the side because the first thing I want to do is some stamping onto this piece here. I'm going to bring in some scratch paper because I'm going to go off the edge. I'm not quite sure where this paper is from. The other side is a washed sort of wood look. So I'm going to stamp over the top of this with Espresso ink, and I'm going to use the books and also, if I can find it, there it is, the teacup as well. Now I keep my grid paper or ledger paper or lined paper in a section all by itself in its own category. Once I've opened the packet and I've used it a little bit, I just file it away so that I've got all those pieces in the one section because I do love working with them. So you can see what I'm doing here is a little bit of layering of stamps. I'm coming down this edge here. I'm putting the books in. I'm going over the top of certain areas. I don't want everything to be too zigzaggy, so I'm just rotating things every now and then. I don't want a particular pattern to this. I do sort of want to make it look a little bit random. And this is just the first layer of stamping that I'm going to be doing with this. I am going to be doing a little bit more stamping, and I'm using Espresso ink here. I'm going to put another teacup over the top of this one. And I might have a little bit coming off the edge here. Before I clean up my stamps, I'm going to bring in my base page, which is just White Daisy. And what I'm thinking of doing is putting this on an angle coming down. So I'm just looking through the paper. If I hold it up to the light, I can see that this area here doesn't have anything on it. So I might just extend this just a little bit across. I don't want it too even. So I'll bring back my Espresso ink, and I think what I'll do is put a book here and then another teacup, maybe more straight up and down like that. And I'm going to leave this as is for now because when I put it onto my piece of White Daisy, I can actually do some more stamping if I need to. And then the next stamp set I'm going to bring in is this one here called Setting the Scene. So this is in the current July-August catalogue, and so is this one as well. I love all of these little details here, but I especially love the words and the dot lines and these wash effects here. So I'm going to be using some of those on this page. I've got the words all loaded up onto my block. I'm just going to bring that in. And then I'm using Espresso ink, and I'm just stamping over the top of my stamped areas. I'm not being particularly careful. You can see some of it isn't a perfect image here, and that's just fine. I want this to look a little bit distressed. And I'm coming all the way down the page, and then I'm going to fill in the areas that I missed, so that it goes all over this. Some of it will go over top of previous stamping, and that's just fine. So I've got this piece here, but I haven't quite finished with it yet. I'm going to bring in this watercolor type circle and some mist ink just to add a little bit of color to this. So I'm just going to ink this up and stamp this off so you can see the effect it has. It's like a watercolor circle where it's bled outside the original parts, but it's got texture through it as well. So I thought that would be fun, just to do a little bit of faux colouring in over the top of these teacups here. I know when I'm crafting, I usually love to have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea off to the side. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on here. I want an odd number. So I'm going to ink up, got to get the right ink out. I'm going to ink up Espresso ink, and I'm going to put another one off here, close up my Espresso and bring in my mist and stamp over top of that. So I've effectively created my own pattern paper. You can still see the original design through the stamping of the lines and everything here, and then I've layered up all of these extra elements to create my own border type strip. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to flip my Versamat over so I've got more of a firm surface, and I'm just angling this on the page, and then I'm going to have my photo here as well. To adhere this, I'm actually going to draw where the piece of paper is coming to, so I know where to put my adhesive, and it will make it easier for trimming away later. So I'm just going to put some adhesive down this line here, and this one has just run out. All right, we're back in action now, so I'm just going to put my adhesive on my page rather than onto my pattern piece of paper here. And I think what I might do is actually ink up the edges of this. So I need to do this side especially before I adhere it to the page. I'm going to just do this with Espresso ink and just go along the edges. You can see what a difference this is going to make to the edge of the paper up against the white. I think it will be just the best touch to have that there rather than having this going straight into the white without any definition on the edge. I'm not adding a whole lot, just enough to give the look that I want. So I'm just going to stop there. Then when I put this onto the page, I'll be able to trim it off and ink up the rest of the edges. So I've got that down like that. I can either put this in my trimmer or I can just simply trim off with my scissors, whatever you're most comfortable to do when it comes to something like this. I've got a guide here on the edge of my white daisy, so it's not too hard to trim this away with my scissors, or I can just put this now into my trimmer and cut down here. And now that I've trimmed that off, I can go in and edge distress the rest of the pattern paper here. I don't want to distress the white, just the pattern paper. Now I'm going to do a bit of a dry fit with how I want things to go. I could put this photo on an angle, but I've already got my page here on an angle, and I've decided that I'm going to leave this section just like it is here, with how it just comes in and out and it fades into the pattern paper. I'm just thinking I might either do a mist backing on this, or I might bring in some Scarlet. So I've just got some scraps here. I feel like the Scarlet really makes it pop up against this pattern and against the white, and it brings out the reds and gives a bit more life to the layout, whereas the mist is just a little bit cool. So I'm going to trim this down to fit. And then I've also gone ahead and I previously stamped some of these images just in intense black in case I was going to colour them in. But I think what I'm going to do is give these the same treatment that I have done to this strip here and stamp these images with Espresso directly over top. I'll just ink this up and stamp, and I really love how that looks. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing to this teacup as well. And I did try this out before I started the video, so I've got one that I prepared earlier. I can save this one for another project. I think that this stack of books here is just going to be too big with these ones as well, and I do want to leave myself some room for journaling. And I'm going to give this little teacup here the same treatment with the mist ink and that circle stamp that I did on the border. It just adds the right amount of colour, I think. It might be too much to have an additional book here. I can always bring one up and I could layer it up here on foam tape to match this one that's underneath. That might be a bit cute to do that. And then I'm thinking what I'm going to do for my journaling is stamp these dotted lines here from that same Setting the Scene stamp set. First, I think what I'm going to do though is stamp my journal lines. Sometimes it's a little bit nerve-wracking to stamp directly onto a page, but I always think if this doesn't work, what I can do is then put a tag in here or something like that to cover this part up. I'm going to do this in mist ink and then come in like this. I like how the mist ink is just a little bit softer, and I think I might be writing a bit more than the room I've got here, so I'm going to stamp another row of these. I quite like how that looks, all nice and organic with no flush edges. It sort of replicates this stamping area that I've got off onto the left here. And I like how all my images are quite muted tones, and this is making my photos stand out even more. I think what I'm also going to do is do some stamping down in this corner to give these elements somewhere to land. So I'm just bringing this scrap piece of paper in. I'm going to do this with mist ink again, and there is another swatch type thing. It's like another watermark. I'm going to stamp that up. I think I might do second generation. I think that's going to work a little bit better. I love how that's looking. I'm going to do that again down here. So my teacup and my book, I'm going to continue that going up the side as well. I love how this is all layering and giving a nice subtle base for these elements. This one needs to be a little bit stronger, I feel, so I'm just going to bring that up a little bit more, give that a little bit more colour. And I think this might work really well coming out from the side of this photo. I'm just going to take my photo away. I need to adhere that down. So about here, and then I'm going to come out a little bit more to the edge, and then another one in just a little bit. It just adds something to this white daisy background, I think. So now I'm going to adhere everything down and I'll be back to do my title. I've got the pieces laid down here and I've hung the book off the edge of the bottom of the piece of paper. I just wanted to have it sitting flush so that it didn't look like it was floating at all. So I'm just trimming off the excess. It's very easy to do once it's adhered, just to turn the page over and trim that little bit off. And so you can see that that actually looks like it's meant to be here. It's not floating above the bottom of the base of the page. Now I've gone through my stamp sets and I've gone back to a 2022, this was in August, stamp of the month. And I really love this little jar with the craft tools in it. So I think that's going to be appropriate for my page. And this is a project that I was working on and I took a photo of it for Instagram, and this white circle here goes on top of that red glitter tag, but I don't like how that's looking on my photo. It's sort of pulling focus. So I'm thinking putting one of these over this will sort of hide it a little bit. And when I opened this packet, I actually had 2 already stamped. So I am going to treat this exactly the same way that I've treated these ones. I'm not going to colour it in. I'm going to experiment here a little bit and use mist ink over one of these and ink it up with that same text and just put that over like so and see if I like that colour. And I think that's going to work better than having more espresso stamped there. So I just need to fussy cut that out. And fussy cutting, I don't mind doing it at all. It's quite easy just to go around and leave a little bit of a white border, or in this case where the text is, just to cut around, turn my paper, not stress too much about it. And if I get too close, no one's going to be paying too much attention to that, I hope. And I find this quite quick and easy to do, especially with these sorts of images. And that's why I wanted to still go ahead and use this stamp set. I know that the thin cuts for this Cozy Up scrapbooking stamp set are no longer available, but they're quite large images and they're fairly easy to cut out. So this little one is just going to sit right here and hide that white circle. And bring in some 2D foam tape. So we have 2 different heights in foam tape. We have a 2D one and a 3D one. And that just means the height of the foam tape is just a little bit different. Now this book is adhered with 2D foam tape. So I'm actually going to double up on the piece at the top so that it has a level sort of playing field when it's adhered onto the page. So it's a single piece at the bottom to go over the book and then a double piece at the top so that it's nice and even. And when I went to get this stamp set out, because I knew that I had this little pot of craft tools, I've seen Eat, Sleep, Teach and Repeat. And I was going to put a title of This is My Classroom, but I'm going to include that in my journaling and I'm going to use this Eat, Sleep, Teach, Repeat and stamp that up. And instead of teach, I think I might put the word craft. And I'm going to do some masking up with this. And I am going to try and do it across my page here. And I know that I can always cut a piece of cardstock if I do mess up at all, but I would like to try stamping direct on my page. Now I haven't used this stamp set at all, so I'm just going to ink it up and stamp it down, and this is going to help me determine whether or not I want to do the Scarlet across the top. I think that will look quite good. So I'm going to just clean off my stamp, make sure that it's nice and dry. I'm going to get my post-it note and I'm going to cover up this T here for teach and hopefully keep that little bit of a heart there. So that is now stuck to my stamp. I can ink this up. And I love having clear blocks because I can look through and I can definitely see that the heart has inked up, but none of the next word of teach has inked. So now I'm going to bring this down towards me. Hopefully I won't get my head in the way. And I've put a little bit of my dirty ink pad on here, so I'm going to have to think of something to hide that. So I've got my eat and my sleep. I'm going to clean this off and then I'm going to load up this little Cassidy alphabet onto stamp blocks to spell craft and stamp that across as well. I'm getting this right down close to me so I can see what I'm doing. Clean off my stamp in between each one. So I'm nearly done here. I just need to do the T. I don't know about you, but I have trouble sometimes picking out the letters when I've got to read an alphabet backwards. So you can see me stamping off just to make sure that it's stamping correctly. So I just need to mask off this section here, bearing in mind that some of it does go a little bit under that heart there. I think I'm going to be fine with this. Looking through the block, it all looks fine. I've got some ink on the end of the block here. So I'm going to wipe that off. Take away my mask and stamp that down. And I love how that looks. because that's what I love to do: eat, sleep, craft, and repeat. So I think these three colours of Mist, Scarlet, and Espresso work quite well together. I didn't expect that they would. They're not something that I would normally pull out to work together, but I do love the pop of red on this page, so I think it was well worthwhile putting that there. So all that's left to do now is my journaling, and I've got to put my thinking cap on to see what I want to do with this area, whether or not I just do some stamping across there to try and hide that little bit of red. And I think what I'm going to do to hide this little bit is actually embrace the fact that that's from the ink pad itself. So I'm going to be a little bit brave here and try and make this look like it was meant to be there. I'm going to get my Scarlet ink back out again. I'm going to do a bit of smooshing here like this, and instead of stamping with the stamp, I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to actually press this into my ink pad, try and get it a little bit messy, and then I need a bit of pressure with this, so I'm turning this around. I hope this works. So hold your breath with me. And you can see I'm getting a few little marks of this going around the page, and it's forming like a little backdrop to it. So I really am just trying to make sure that this looks like it's all supposed to be there. And I actually don't mind the effect of this because, as you know, when you're using ink pads, you do tend to get a little bit messy and things don't always go how you expect them to. So I'm just going to put a couple more of these down in this section, and then some more over in this section as well. I know this looks a little bit crazy what I'm doing now, but I really didn't want to start over and do my page all over again. So I'm just going to put some more of these down in this area down here. And I quite like how this is looking. So once again, I'm going to ink this up. Because the ink is coming off this fairly easily, there's only one little fine line on here, but it was enough to cause some damage in the first place. I'm trying not to put this ink pad all over my fingers. And I think I'm going to call that done. And I quite like how that's given just a little bit more texture to the page. So not an accident that I would want to repeat, but I think one that can be overcome with just embracing that fact and adding a few more little areas of it on there. So I'll take some photos of this. I'll probably pop that up on Instagram, and I'm going to put my journaling in as well. If you haven't done so already, make sure you check out the videos from the other creative design team ladies that have gone before me. I think Erin and Andrea have gone before me. And then of course there's Chelsea, Julie, Katie and Jama to come up after this video goes up. I'll have a playlist link in the description below, as well as links to all their channels as well, so you can go and check out what they do. This has been a really fun collab, and I know I've cheated a bit with the back to school theme, but this technically is my classroom. I love standing at my desk with all my tools and my supplies and playing and doing exactly what this title represents: eat, sleep, craft and repeat. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to see you next time. Happy crafting and bye for now.